Welcome to our podcast. It's funny because it's true. This is Alex McQueen. You may have known him in various comedy roles over the years. And I'm Tim Clyde. And we're going to be basically trying to uncover what makes stuff funny. What's the DNA, the secret sauce underneath what makes people laugh and why? And we've got some really interesting guests.
There's various sauces that we're bringing to the table to taste. And one of those sauces, Billy Sneddon.
Billy Sneddon.
A fantastic editor-in-chief of all comedy the world has ever seen. Give some highlights to the
TV. Alas, with the Jones back in the 90s. I used to laugh my tits off at that. Smack the Pony, Brass Eye, I'm Alan Partridge. The Thick of It, were you in that?
I might have been.
Yeah, The In-Between, were you in that? In the Loop, were you in that?
I might have been.
Oh, hang on, do you guys know it? Four Lions, were you in that? Bloody hell, absolutely fabulous. You wasn't in that. No, good. And the franchises, and also, but you don't. I mean, basically, you are Mr. Comedy Editor, arguably.
So we're extremely lucky to have you on this.
Massively
on this
honoured.
Absolute pleasure and an honour.
So, how did you get into editing in the first place? I mean, was there a great editor?
Almost by accident. So the quick version is I got a degree in botany out of Glasgow University.
Standard.
Didn't want to do plants. So I came down to, it was the 80s, so I thought the industry to be in was advertising, loads of money and flash cars. Didn't get any of that.
So did you apply to agencies?
Yeah, I came down and did a course in advertising in Watford College.
Oh yeah, Watford.
Then I got a job in advertising, became a copywriter, was rubbish at it, got the sack. Then I became a runner on shoots because that looked like more fun because people were actually making stuff rather than 95% what you do as a copywriter never sees the light of day, of course, as you know. And so I started working at Jeff Stark's production company, and then I ran into an editor in a pub, and he said, I'm looking for an edit assistant. Are you interested in editing? I've got an opening. And I said, deep breath, editing is exactly what I've always wanted to do. This must be fate. And I didn't know what editing was.
Right, so, yeah. Did you mean, when you said, yes, I want to do it, why would you say yes?
Because I didn't want to be, I was a runner. And
so
you
only did it because you didn't want to do something you were doing. Great.
Yeah, brilliant. I thought anything, the first opportunity that comes swimming past, I'm going to take.
And this was back in the day where you were literally cutting the film.
Yeah, I was cutting on film. Yeah, I had a Steenbeck flatbed, 16mm and 35mm cutting room.
Yeah.
You'd look for a shot and you couldn't find it, and you said, "Oh, it's stuck to the bottom of my shirt." It's like it was just I couldn't get to grips with it at all.
Did you have a snapping it and stuff?
Yeah, you have a little machine that cuts it, and it's just But I couldn't get to grips with it at all.
That must have been a nightmare for timing. I mean, you're trying to get just the right beat.
I hardly used it, to be honest. It was well on the way out by the time.
Was it? Okay, was
it? Right. What he had got more use was a U-matic tape-to-tape system. Yeah. So it was like a stack of U-matic recorders. And if you wanted to go back and drop a shot in, you'd have to copy the whole program down onto another tape and then go back and start again. It was absolutely mental. But as soon as I got this job, the guy, he wasn't massively computer literate. Oh, he was, but I was computer savvy completely. And this thing called an Avid arrived, which is computerized editing system, which we still use to this day. And I just saw that was the future and just got stuck into that. And that was it.
So it was ingesting these film rushes into the system, working out where all the time codes were, and then you just cut it.
Editing has got vastly more complicated over the years. You'd think things would have got simpler, but it's gone the opposite way. Whereas, I used to know everything about editing and how to work my particular piece of software. It would only be me. I would, if I was editing a program, it would be just me, no assistants, nothing, and I would do everything, and including output it at the end of the job. And I knew everything about everything. Then it got to the point where I had to have an assistant because there was so much going on, so technically complicated. It was had to have two of us, but I knew their job. Then I had an assistant, but I didn't know how to do their job, but they did it. And now I don't even know what they do.
Right.
It's that complicated. I've got my own little thing that I can do. I can edit. Someone else is going to do all the admin. And then, but in drama, I remember there was a scene. I did a film called about the Busby Babes United, David Tennant, and there's a scene where he's crying in a stairwell. And it's just one shot, of him, and he breaks down and he's having a cry. And it's like the shot is 50 seconds long or a minute, and I'm trying at 50 seconds. Yeah, that's great. Sustains. Let's try it 20 seconds. Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that's enough. 30 seconds. Yeah, it's David Tennant. It's awesome.
Good. Yeah, he's
you know, can you imagine telling a joke and then waiting 10 seconds for the punchline? No. It's just not. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Although there can be little moments where something hysterically funny is happening, and actually almost holding the joke too long can also be very funny. Yeah, there's that kind of trick where you...
So I'm in an edit suite doing Alan Partridge, and Armando comes in. Do you remember the episode with Stephen Mangan? Dan! In the car park.
Yeah.
Sorry, microphone. So I'm editing that scene, and he's saying, Dan... So it's funny, and then it becomes ridiculous, and then it becomes funny again, like, because it's so long. And I'm looking at it going, okay, I've got to get the exact number of Dan's absolutely perfect here, because it's in my control. I can cut to Stephen Mangan shot, and I can cut back a bit later, and I can get the exact what is the sweet spot, the exact number of Dan's, and I'm struggling with it a bit. Armando comes in, sits down, and says, how are you getting on with that? I said, yeah, okay, it's okay. I'm struggling a bit just to get the exact number of Dan's just perfect. What do you think? How many do you think it should be? And he looked at me like I'm the world's biggest idiot and said, all of them.
Right.
They had already worked it out.
Oh, I see. Right.
You know, they knew what they were doing.
But that's interesting that they hadn't because if that was a key set-up joke, they hadn't translated that or given you any brief when you're editing it. By the way, when you get to the car park, Alan's going to shout Dan a ridiculous number of times, and we're just going to keep on it till it's uncomfortable, and they keep on it a little bit further.
All you get is a script. And then you get... I never have a conversation. Well, different directors work different ways, okay?
Right.
This is the thing. There's no perfect way of doing it. But I never talked to Armando while he's filming, unless something complicated has come up and needs a bit of editing knowledge or something. I don't know. I can't even think of a single time where that even happened. But so you get your script supervisor will write notes on another piece of paper, and you might get a little circle around a take that they like the best, and it's usually not the best. But
is that right?
Yeah, a lot of the time, yeah.
It felt like
amazing amount of the time, the take that they think is the best take is not the best take.
Oh, yeah.
But that's because when you've put it together and you're in the room, it's a completely different feeling from when you're actually shooting it.
Yeah.
And also it's there isn't like, it's very rare that a whole take is the best take. You're breaking it up into bits and pieces.
Or from an actor's perspective, it's always, between 3 takes, like, the first take was good for the first 2 minutes, but I was really rubbish in the last. Yeah. And then, the second take, I was good at the end. I do hope the editor is able to harvest the best of the 3, rather than just use take 1, because it might be technically the most sort of...
The continuity is easier.
But before we come to the actual process, your comedy heroes on the following 4 categories, who is your stand-up hero?
That's very difficult. It's either Billy Connolly or Bill Hicks.
Good. Is it just because they share your name, Billy?
Yeah.
By any chance? Is that basically, who's the funniest other Billy other than me?
I think I just admire Billy Connolly so much because I know how he works. And no one else does it the way he does it. His method is different to everyone else's.
What would you say that is?
What is that? What's that?
He doesn't know what he's going to say when he walks out in front of a crowd.
Really?
It's
So
absolutely
he wouldn't go out
He
and
might have a
little
little,
notes.
No, he will have a little sheet of paper which has got bullet points written of particular stories that he's got.
Right.
But he doesn't know what order he's going to do them in, or if he's going to do them at all, or if he's going to say one half of one and then go on to something else and then come back to the next one. That's because he's got ADHD. He just forgets where he is, goes and tells another story, and everyone thinks it's so clever that he comes back to the beginning and tells the end of the story that he told him the first time. It's just because his mind is racing. It's not a plan.
Fascinating.
And it's like, I remember editing an Eddie Izzard stand-up video, and they said, we've got 2 nights, put them together and make one video.
The funniest.
And whatever. So I reeled them up and I'm cutting away and I'm thinking, second night, it's identical to the first night.
Oh, interesting.
The guy is just so precise.
Yeah.
To the point where at one point he forgot where he was telling a joke, told an emergency joke, really clever, and got back on the horse. I thought, that's great. I think it was a mistake, but I'm going to leave it in. Watched the second night, he did it again.
Right.
Wow, okay.
It's
so
completely fooled me entirely.
So the two of them are direct opposite.
Different.
Yeah. There's a friend of ours who runs a theatre in Chiswick where a lot of the stand-ups do their little sort of rehearsal show. And we were watching them one I won't say who it was, but the producer sits in the box. They do 5 nights. They're doing an hour and a half's material to get to 30 minutes or something. And it's just literally tick, cross, question mark every night. So as the jokes go, just measuring the audience, is that funny? If you get 4 out of 5 ticks, it's nearly probably will make the show. But if it's 5 ticks out of 5 ticks, it's in.
Yeah.
So it's just a dissemination job of the funniest moments.
Yeah. That's
so
like,
you get to a point, but then stand up. It's funny because then the craft isn't so much stand up and work with the night. It's actually extremely well crafted and choreographed.
People do have sometimes. Some people have a scientific approach to it. Sacha Baron Cohen's like that, but not everyone is like that.
Well, as you say, Billy Connolly is.
Yeah,
it's squirrels dancing in his mind.
There's a lot of. There's no real hard and fast way of going about it. Sasha has a grid worked out where, like, a joke happens, he'll test screen it, and he'll get a score out of 10. Right. If it doesn't get to 8, we've got to recut it and try it again.
Right. On the edit.
It's like.
What did you edit with him then, or is this?
I worked on the second Borat, the movie.
Okay. That's not on here.
No, it's I couldn't get an editor credit because I'm not in the union.
Oh, stop it!
Yeah.
Right.
And what about comedy double act? Any favourite? Who's your favourite comedy double act?
Morecambe and Wise was massive in our house and probably everyone's house when we were kids. So nothing will ever top that. Just for the sheer. I mean, there might be others that you could probably list who might be funnier
for you
in some way, but
Morecambe and Wise.
In terms of not even as an influence, but just as something that was a big deal as a child.
Can I just drill down on a bit of that briefly? That's obviously there's a very classic disparity between the straight man and the funny man.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is, or not?
Well, it's a classic comedy trope, is the guy trying to get something done surrounded by an idiot or a load of idiots.
Right.
And that just keeps repeating itself because...
What's that formula again? Say again.
It's the guy in the middle who's the straight man trying to get a task done, surrounded by just stupidity.
Great.
And he's fighting against it. I mean, that's what Four Lions is.
Yeah.
I mean, like probably most things that you could run through my CV, and most of them are probably that.
That's really
which is basically Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah,
isn't it? That's basically
Yeah.
playing that joke over and over. But a lot of
In-Betweeners, Will is that guy.
Yeah.
So,
and what might that be in the thick of it?
well, it's whoever the minister is.
Yeah, the minister is surrounded by.
I mean, they're not competent either, though, in the thick of it. So everyone's. I suppose Malcolm is competent, isn't he?
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't
So
it?
it might be Malcolm.
Is Malcolm trying to get stuff done?
It's Malcolm.
Utterly
Of
wrecked.
course it is. What am I talking
Yeah.
about?
Out of that CV there, do you have a proudest piece of work? It has to be the thick of it. But no. What's your proudest piece? Yeah.
When I first edited the first 3 episodes we did together of the thick of it, I knew immediately, you don't always get this feeling, but I knew immediately that this was going to be massive.
right. Oh wow.
And I turned round to Armando and said, I think this is the best thing you've ever done. And he'd already done Partridge,
Yeah.
so that's a big thing to say. And he said, you might be right.
I'd love to, let's look at your working process, sort of a day in the life of Billy Sneddon in the edit suite. I'd be really interested on a granular level to know what it's like to go into the room at the start of the day and leave at the end of the day. What happens? What do you do? What's the process?
So what happens is they shoot a scene. I get all the footage for that scene the next day, and I will do what we call an assembly edit of that scene. And it's just me in a room on my Todd working out, and I've got to try and get that as good as it can possibly be. So my attitude is then I'll show it to whoever's going to come in and I'll say, can you beat that? So it's a fine cut, but it's full length. I've not cut anything out yet.
And can I ask, what is that footage? Is it everything that's been shot in the day, or is it just selected takes
no,
that
it's
the director said
absolutely
I
everything.
want? Right, so you get the
absolutely
entire download.
And I watch every single
But
stitch.
you've already chosen which camera angle for each line. So
Yes.
you've already gone through the process of going.
I will go through everything with a microscope and put together the best possible version that I can think of that scene.
So it could be, for a 5-minute scene, it could actually be a 30-minute cut.
No, it'll be a 5-minute cut.
Okay.
No,
I will
it's
choose
to time.
I will do a finished scene. I won't choose a whole lot of select takes. Well, I will initially. So this is the quick working method of how I get to that point. I go through. I go to the. Let's say there's maybe 4 or 5 takes of each angle. So that if it's us talking, there'll be a wide shot, a shot for reverse, singles, whatever it is, and there'll be 5 of each of those. Let's say. So I'm going to go through every single one of those, but I'm going to go through them backwards, because usually the takes get better.
Yes.
So first thing I'm going to do is go to the last take of every setup and quickly scroll through it and see what it is visually and think where that visual shot might be. Usually you start with a wide shot and you get tighter. Not always, but the general kind of most common way of cutting is to find a point where the scene turns or becomes a different thing or has a turning point or something that there's a moment where you can go tight or whatever. So you'll find that moment and then work your way towards it. So I'll say, so I'll work through all the takes backwards and I'll put each shot in where I think it should go. So now I've got a cut which has maybe the same line 4 times.
Got it.
So that's the one that you just were suggesting, which is my select edit. I'll save that and I'll make another copy. And this time I'm just going to have this scene. So I'm going to choose one of those 4 and it's going to be in that moment.
So you build it, you take it all down to 4, and then from the 4 you select to 1.
Yes. And then I boil it down to a fine cut.
Your fine.
My fine cut, yes. And then I'll do a sound pass where I might steal audio from other
Oh,
takes.
brilliant. Oh, that's good to hear. Because as an actor, you could think, I had the right expression, but I swear I hit the right tonal note in a previous take. That's so annoying. But when geniuses like you come along, yeah. Okay.
If I tell you how many times you've seen an actor say a line on TV and the audio that you hear is from another take.
Oh, great. Are you pretty confident at that point you've got the very best of the best stuff that's there in that exercise?
You always feel pretty good about it because what I've done is like I've run out of ideas. I'm cutting it until I can't think of anything else that I want to change.
Right.
So at that point, it's as good as it can be, as far as I'm concerned, until someone tells me different, and they always do. Yeah. But when someone else will come in and go, "How about this, that, or the other?"
Who's that? Who's
a
the
director
else?
or a showrunner?
Right, they'll come in. So after you've done your fine cut.
Yeah. So the whole episode or movie, depending what it is available to view a matter of 2 days after the shoot ends.
Right.
So a director or a showrunner will come. Usually, if it's American system, they have showrunners.
Yep.
UK system, a director. So in the American system, there's a director, but he'll come in and only have if for a TV show, they'll only have, if it's half-hour TV show, they're supposed to only have 2 days.
Say, I'd like it to be shorter there, longer there. Could you have that take, not that take?
Just whatever they can jam into 2 days in terms of ideas that they've had while they were shooting it that might not be obvious.
Yeah.
And then a showrunner will come in and spend the majority of the time with me. But that's not, the UK system is different. A director will stay all the way through the whole of post-production in the UK system.
With that sort of period of time,
Yeah.
because you're trying to craft something really importantly difficult to get the timing everything right. How do you combat the kind of duration of just having, there's sort of almost fatigue that
This
comes
is a really good point. The thing about say you're doing a comedy film, if I tell you a joke, you might find it funny. If I tell you just one more time, you could probably listen to it. If I try and tell you that joke 100 times, you're going to go mad.
Yeah. And
This is what I'm doing for a living.
Yeah. Listening to the same joke 100 times.
Yes. So what you have to do is, obviously if you're doing a film, there's loads of considerations that aren't just, even if it's a comedy, that are just the comedy. But the first thing you attack is the jokes.
Right.
So you do that first while you're still feeling fresh about it. So you try and make each scene as funny as it can be. Do a whole pass of the whole thing, just thinking about the jokes.
Key moments, yeah.
And then it becomes unfunny quite quickly after that. But you have to rely on a sort of muscle memory.
Wow.
Like it
was funny when I first saw it, so it's still funny,
Yes.
even though I can't see.
There's so many times I've done jobs where everyone execs and everything and producers have come in and watched it at the end of the process. So we're all just, what, stony face. and at the end of the viewing, it's like, well done, that was really hilarious. Well done, it was really funny.
But you didn't laugh once.
Good job. Nothing. But we know it is funny.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes there's one thing that you keep laughing at right the way to the end. It's really weird. Like it's things that other people don't even think are funny. So you notice little things.
You're saying, so Sasha has this thing where even at the edit point, he'll experiment with an audience reaction. So there might be, like alpha beta testing, he might be like, okay, do I take that joke to 11 or do I rest it at 9? Or do I add tomato sauce to it? Let's see what...
Well, he's taken an approach where he's trying to make a science out of it.
Right.
It's a scientist's approach. I'm not sure I completely subscribe to it. I think you've got to... for me personally, I think this is what I was saying before, is like there's not a definitely right way of doing things and a wrong way. That works for him. But it's like, for me, if I was in that position, I would want to try and trust myself to have an instinct and not necessarily
rely
on testing with an audience. Because audiences, this is another whole subject, is test audiences. Don't get me started on that. But if something's new and fresh and a completely original idea, the chances are they might react negatively to it just because of that, because it's unfamiliar. So it depends what you're doing if you're trying to break new territory.
Because back in the day, we should really talk about canned laughter a bit, because back in the day, you would, a lot of this stuff would be shot with an audience present in all sitcoms and things.
Yeah.
There would be a lot, or it'd be put on screen, there'd be an audience. So you'd create a genuine audience response that makes something, because obviously if you're in a room full of people laughing, like stand up.
Well, do you remember Alan Partridge, when he's in the motel?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if I say to you that was filmed in front of an audience, you might go, yeah, of course, fine. But if you watch it, it's a 360-degree set.
Yeah.
So the camera will be pointing this way, that way anyway, and yet it is filmed in front of an audience.
That's it.
So it's a closed set. So the audience is there, but they're watching it on a screen.
Oh, I see. Right.
And before they start filming, Steve would pop out as Alan Partridge and do a little bit of warm-up to the audience, going, I am really in here.
Oh, my God.
And then disappear behind the curtain, and then they would film.
And then they're watching the tapes.
Yeah.
But then that's fascinating, yeah, because you're the same warehouse you get of watching the same joke 4 times. If they're doing 5 takes, and the audience has already seen the joke.
If it's filmed in front of an audience, they can't really afford to do 5 takes.
Right.
So you can.
So you pick it's 1 and maybe 2 if you're lucky.
Right.
That's it. And then I would have to try and. Sometimes the laughter would be not really there on the second take, but the performance would. You would try and do a bit of audio work to. But it's not like the last series of Alan Partridge. There was a lot of complaints about the laugh track was so loud. I wish they wouldn't have put all that canned laughter on.
Right.
Going, that's just what happened. The laughter was so loud that it was intruding on the audio of the performance. But it's in the mix.
You can't really take it away.
There's only a limited amount of what you can do. I think they did EQ a lot of it out, but there's only so much you can do before the dialogue starts to sound tinny or whatever.
But that's a very interesting question you asked about that, how quickly you become snowblind if you're looking at a piece of comedy 25 times.
Yeah.
So what is your technique for that? What do? You said muscle memory. You just have to...
Unavoidable. You can't do it. You have to be when you get towards the end of a job, you have to be very, very careful, because you can end up chopping stuff out that you shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Because you've lost sight of the fact that it was working.
Very interesting.
So it's a dangerous game. And the thing about it is that it's easy to cut jokes out, because I've said this before to people, is like the one thing Armando taught me so many things, probably more than any other individual. But the one thing that stuck with me at the time, because it was like a road to Damascus kind of moment when he turned around and said it to me, was, you know that all jokes are interruptions. What? What do you mean? So, well, interrupted to the narrative. Every single joke that's ever been told is an interruption. So you've got the narrative and you've got a joke, and they're not the same thing. You can lose the joke and the narrative will still be there. And I can't, that's a sweeping generalization. That can't be right. And I was thinking about it. It is right. Yeah. You're telling a story, you stop telling the story, you tell a joke, and then you start telling the story again. That's just how it works. So that's why it's dangerous with comedy, because you can cut that joke out and join it back up and you wouldn't know it was ever there. If you think about what all the best comedies are, they would work if they weren't comedies. So their stories are interesting, involving, say something about the human condition, and they've got hilariously funny jokes in there as well. Like, I mean, if I said Life of Brian is my favorite comedy movie, that probably would work as a mistaken identity thriller. I mean, the story is brilliant. So, it's both. Yes, and that's what you do when you're editing, is you're trying to keep all the balls in the air at the same time. You're trying to, it's not just about making hilarious, funny moments. It depends on what kind of film it is. I suppose if it's something like Airplane, but it's just jokes. So,
but there is a story.
It would be a short film. There would be a story.
Yeah.
What's the best bit about your job? What's the favourite part of your existence as an editor?
The favourite thing really is that I'm sat next to and working with and engaging with people that I would never have a chance to even get close to.
Right.
Otherwise, and pick their brains and just be part of their world.
That's, yeah.
And just, I mean, it's a joy of my life to have worked with some people like Armando Iannucci and Chris Morris, and I mean, I could say there's loads more, but I'd forget some of them, so I should just
But what do you think? Do you think is there one secret sauce? Is there one key thing to making it work? And you talk about the narrative, but coming off to take a joke, but underneath it there's a story, and that's the key thing. You've got to have a strong thread. But I mean, is that, or do people just do this in different ways? So is there different, like Chris Morris?
Yeah.
Is an extraordinary individual, but is he vastly different to a Billy Connolly or to a Peter Sellers or to these?
So there's a number of different things at play here. One is working method, just physical working method. Another is your attitude towards things, what is funny, and comedy is a very personal thing to a lot of people. Like, there's lots of members of my family think Mrs. Brown's Boys is the funniest thing ever made. I'm not in that camp. But, I mean, you can't argue with the numbers, because people watch that. And a lot of people absolutely love it. And it's one of the most successful things out there. So, I don't know. But in terms of working methods, it's difficult to, there isn't the key thing to take away is there isn't a general way of doing it. Like with Chris Morris, we're not in the same room together. Like, hardly ever. We will screen it together and sit and watch it together and then talk. But we don't really do any editing in the room together.
Right.
So he can work in Avid. So he's in his office looking at a scene, maybe throwing down a few shots, writing a couple of notes on things. I'm working on a different scene. And then when he's finished with that, he'll send it to me and I'll look at what he's done and I'll go, oh yeah, I get where he's trying to go here. And I'll put my sauce into it as well, a few ideas. And I'll create another version. But while I'm doing that, he's off on a different scene doing something else. So,
whereas Armando
Armando's working method is to give notes. So he'll come in, watch it, and he'll reel off a load of thoughts that he's got, and I'm going to write them all down. I'm not editing, I'm just writing everything down that he's feeling and thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm chipping in with a few thoughts of my own as well, and I create a task list of things that need attention. Then he disappears, and when I've got through the list, I'll give him a shout, and he comes back in again, and we look at it and go through that process again.
So neither of them in that instance
Completely different.
sit beside you in the edit suite and go, no, I want it to cut there, cut there.
That's actually not that. It's more common for them not to be in the room.
Oh.
It's because, well, there's a number of advantages that way. So they get the best out of me because I've got the little bit more air and freedom to actually put my own ideas into the mixer. And also they get to remain quite reasonably fresh.
Not snowblind.
So they can. Their subjectivity doesn't lose.
That's really interesting.
Not everyone does that though. I've got directors who will come in and just sit there
Suddenly show
together and just, okay, we're in this trench together. Let's just go. And so and that's valid too.
And how do you find yourself resolving conflicts between you and the showrunner or the director in terms of, are you always ultimately the servant of the director or showrunner or not?
Kind of, but it never gets to the point where there's a standoff.
Right.
I don't like getting into conflict with people. So if what I'm saying isn't received well, there's a strong chance it's not a good idea. So I've got to accept that as well. Not everything you come up with is going to work. Yeah. That's just what editing's about. You try things out, and some of them work, some of them don't. You've got to be able to recognize what does and doesn't. But there's only one arbiter of good taste, and that is the director or showrunner. And that needs to be a singular vision that I can relate to and understand and help them get there. It's not the other way around, really. So I'm not going to get into my catchphrase is I'll take the horse to water and just leave it there. So I'll give you the idea, and if you don't like it, that's not my problem. We're just not going to do it.
There's a lovely process. You were a copywriter to begin with in advertising. There's a lovely process in advertising where we have an art director and a copywriter that work as a team. And for a while I couldn't, it's odd. I mean, it's kind of obvious and simple. You've got pictures and words, but there's another very important thing that plays in that the ego of one has to get past the ego of the other for it to be a good enough idea to leave the room.
Yes.
And I suspect when you're in your box editing and you go, it's a blinder, I can see this shot. And that's where the comedy is landing the tree or whatever happens. And actually someone else comes in and goes, it's brilliant. Or, didn't work for me.
It does
and actually
happen.
that's a moment is that having that arbitrary...
Directors have big egos. I mean, it goes with the territory, obviously. So you've got to... There's a number of psychological tricks and things which you put at play to try and nudge them into where you... It's a tricky process because I don't want to overplay it and try and dominate the room because I'm trying to help that person get what they want. Yeah. My job is to facilitate. I'm a kingmaker in a way because they're the one who are going to be standing up there with the Oscar, not me. So I'm trying to... There's my maid. Yeah, okay. I don't think there should be. That's another story. Oh. But, okay, I'll just give you one example of a thing that I sometimes do and hope no director I work with is going to watch this. If you want to give someone an idea, what you're trying to do is make them think that it was their idea. So you give them half the idea. So you throw out a thought and go, I wonder if... Oh, never mind. Anyway, what were we talking about? So you've said it, and it's gone out there, and then you've just moved on. And then, sure as apples are apples, 4 days later, they'll go, shall we go da-da-da-da-da-da? And you go,
that's a great... Thank God you're here.
I like it.
Yeah, and also, but within the craft, whilst a lot of people in the everyday world won't know you and what
your
you do,
CV is a glittering chrome.
I mean, it's the Steve Coogans and everyone else will know if you're looking at it and you're making it funny. He's built respect for you. He'll know you've got an equity in saying, no, I've looked at that edit. It's funnier if you don't come through the door.
And I've seen that. I saw the edit you did on In the Loop. I play the ambassador, and I arrange very carefully for something to occur, and then I'm told, no, I want the opposite. And all I do is go into the room, and I do have a scene beyond that, but you've cut it And the door just opens and the people laugh immediately because they know, oh God, he's had to go back in and do the very opposite of what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that is...
That's creating the script
Yeah.
in post.
But you made the bullets. I just fired the gun.
Oh, I like it. Sausages. We should move on a little.
Yes, we should.
Can I just tell you about In the Loop? Is that was my first movie, and it was a baptism of fire. The first cut of In the Loop was 4.5 hours long. Could have made about 6 different movies out of that movie.
That's
It was absolutely so hard to get that down to 90-something minutes. I cannot tell you.
But now, as I wanted to ask you about this, because in the craft of making comedy in particular, there's other things as well, but there's 2 very different approaches. One is it's carefully, possibly tested and scripted, or just scripted to a point where someone's vision is absolutely on a piece of paper. This is word for word what people are going to say. They might improvise a bit. And there's another which is just shove people in a scene, create attention, go. And improvise, and then we'll just film it all. And some of the greatest, funniest films have just been done that way, haven't they? Where it's so you've had to presumably cut both.
Yeah, but I mean, I think improvisation is a little bit overrated in that I think it's probably not as common. No, not overrated. I mean, sorry, overrated is the wrong word. Not as commonly done as you might think.
Right.
Because everything that we do is to make the heavily prepared look spontaneous. So you will watch something and think that it looks like it's been improvised, but it hasn't. And I think The Thick of It is an example where there was a lot of improvisation in The Thick of It, but it was done in rehearsal, mostly.
Right.
So they would write a script, rehearse it, a load of stuff would come out of rehearsal, and then that would go into the script. By the time we get to film it,
it was relatively.
We used to do an improvised take, right? Didn't we? So we'd do like 3 or 4 takes, nail that, and then go, right, okay, let's do a loosey-goosey one.
Yeah.
And just see what happens. Exactly. But interestingly, very often, what the loose take would be the one that had the energy, the feel, the performance, the vibe. It was good, but maybe it just needed all the improvisation. So many times I would take that take and just cut out all the improvisation and go back to the script.
That's really interesting.
Oh, but from the improvised...
From the improvised take.
That's fascinating.
Because that was the take that had the energy.
I think you're in a really unique position because you get to see the absolute warts and all, and then you're really pulling this into the thing that then becomes funny or not funny, and it's a really powerful position to be in. And I think one thing we've been chatting quite a bit about is at the root of what makes stuff funny. What do you think is the balance between the tension, scenario, script, story, narrative for what's been created that could create a really funny scenario, and the performance? The people, so the skeleton versus the flesh, if you like. How much of it is? I mean, if you take a really funny actor, can you give them a bad script and it's still going to be funny, or could you take a really funny narrative and give it to a terrible actor or somebody who's not as funny and it's so be funny? So how much?
I think it's more the other way around.
Right.
But it's a very difficult thing to generalize about.
Sure.
But I think one of the tricky things about comedy is that I used to say, like, if you wanted to really boil it down, what is comedy would be the truth exaggerated. So there has to be, all that means really is that it has to be, it has to feel real in some level. It has to feel genuine.
Is there an example of that?
Not forced.
Do you have a little vignette of that?
Well, so if you're performing in a comedy, one of the things that's tempting to do is to go quite big to reach for a laugh, and it's the worst thing you can do, because if you look like you're trying to be funny, if it looks like an actor trying to be funny, you're stuffed. It has to look like not an actor, it has to look like that character in a real situation. So you have to attack it with probably the same degree of authenticity as you would with a dramatic role. Yeah. And allow the material to be funny.
Yeah. I had a note from a writer-director saying, please don't play the drama or the comedy. That's in the writing. Just play the truth. Yes. And then it'll be funny or dramatic. Nice. It's a really useful note. It's like,
But it's not as so simple as the tricky thing about comedy is that what you're doing is maybe a heightened scene, a scenario, which is maybe a bit ridiculous, or the character is a bit ridiculous, or so I've got this thing where I've got a thing called the line, which is you trying to push it to a certain point where it becomes funny, but you can't go over a certain line, an invisible line. There's a line there. If you go still just slightly above it,
So what's
it becomes into
that?
like bad sitcom.
Right.
But that line is different in every situation for every actor and for every moment and for every show. It's not as simple as saying
Not the line.
don't go big.
Yeah.
Because if I said to you, what is the funniest sitcom of all time, you might say Fawlty Towers.
Yeah.
And that performance
The
is
line's
massive.
quite high up, isn't it? Yeah.
But you don't watch Fawlty Towers and go, that's John Cleese being funny. That's Basil Fawlty
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Eccentric.
the way.
Yeah.
It's a real character that you're watching. You're not watching John Cleese. And so he was so brilliant at doing that character that he could take it to such a level and still keep everything together in terms of it coming across
Right,
as real.
you don't think of him as John Cleese, where you do think of him as John Cleese and other things. But definitely in Basil Fawlty, he's inhabited that.
The script is the script. So the performance is, as I'm looking at it, the script might not change from one take to another, but the performance will. So that's the thing, the number one thing that I'm looking at that overrides everything. I'd rather put a bad edit in and have the exact take that I want to go to the next shot. I'd rather put a dodgy edit and do a bump than actually not use the best take for performance, because it overrides everything else.
Right.
It's all other considerations.
What are the top three? Yeah, it's
Scripts, casting, editing. Yeah. If you've got the script right and you've got the right people to play those parts, you've won half the battle already.
That brings me to a side wheel, which is why wouldn't you be a director?
Oh, yeah.
And have you been a director?
I have.
You have, yeah. Do you not? Yeah. What?
Since you're so good at this.
Well,
what do you do?
that wouldn't make me a good director.
Well,
but
in your hierarchy, you're putting the editor slightly ahead of the director in terms of potentially their impact. And
so when I became an editor, I thought that was a staging post on my route to inevitable world domination,
As the director.
or whatever.
showrunner, or whatever.
Yeah. But what happens is, if you become good at something,
Yeah.
you get into a position of comfort
Yeah.
with that, and people want you to do more of the same.
Yeah.
And before I know it, 30 years went by. So I did actually have ambitions to write my own stuff and be a director. But then as soon as I finish a job, the phone will go and it's someone amazing on the other end of the line going, do you want to come and do this? Me. Oh, but of course I do.
Yeah.
So that's what happened, really. But I did direct an episode of The Thick of It. Armando was lucky.
Oh, did he?
I was lucky enough to
Did
persuade him to let me do it.
Oh,
and I
so it
didn't love
wasn't
it.
someone ill. It wasn't someone who was genuinely. You have a go at this. He said, "Let's see." But
Well, it was on the last series. He wanted to concentrate more on the scripts because there was a lot of alt lines that he wanted to sit and work with, even while we were filming. The writers are all behind the camera going like this while we're filming, still going, "Oh, whoa, what? Try this or that." So he was wanted to be more involved in that. So lots of us that were been behind the scenes got an opportunity to direct an episode.
Did you edit your episode?
No.
You didn't. So okay.
so and that almost deliberately, so you knew, because otherwise you'd be telling yourself your own jokes.
Well, I wouldn't have time because, as I say, it's being edited the next day.
I really loved you. A while ago, we went into this thing about truth, and actually, what you're doing is just saying you're exaggerating truths, and that's what makes things really funny. Where the audience is just going, oh, that's and it's McIntyre's stand-up is almost entirely, but a lot of Peter Kay's is a lot really just founded on, I'm just going to tell you a lot of truths. Yeah. And you're going to laugh because you go, oh, that's exactly like Auntie Madge. Exactly. But there is obviously another comedy which is jokes, and and obviously Tim Vine, and there's a load of stuff which actually it's not really truth at all. It's just wordplay.
Just set
Ronnie
up
Barker,
gag.
just gag, gag.
Yeah.
Where do you think? Where do we lie in making the very best comedy? Is it truths or jokes?
Well, you see, the thing is that it's the setup gag thing is like pure sitcom, and that's not really to me now. I think it's like Chris Morris has said a thing which is you have to have you have to have a message. There has to be something that you're trying to say. Otherwise, you're just being the court jester. I'm not sure exactly. I think comedy is such a difficult thing to do and such a pure art form that I think just being funny by itself is justification. It's okay. But if you can, I suppose as we go back to, this is satire now, if you've got something where you can recognize the real world in it as well, that just gives it so much more. If you recognize that you've satirized something to a point where it's become funny, but you can still recognize the real world in it. Then that's the best of everything. Because you've got a message, you've got something to say, and you're relating to people's real lives that they can recognize as well, and you're hilariously funny on top. So why not have the jam and the cake and everything?
Yeah, and that's something like your favourite film, The Life of Brian, is actually, even though it's in a completely different world, supposedly at a completely different time, and sort of based on something that no one can really relate to, it's absolutely clustered with little truths, isn't it? Whether it's the ludicrousness of
every scene says something about the human condition.
Exactly, which is what's so, and it's lovely then painted in a different picture, and it allows you to laugh at it. It's so truth. The truth is the centre of comedy in your mind. It's the truth.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. A massive thank you to Billy Sneddon. A colossal thank you to Timothy Clyde.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you. Do follow, do like, do share, all those things, and we'll see you next time.